Alors Madame Bloomingdale, c'était une fierté bien sûr, parce qu'elle les portait d'une façon avec une élégance et un chic tout à fait particulier.
Gianfranco Ferré took over as creative director for Christian Dior, and you can see a transition from Marc Bohan's clothes really being real clothing into Gianfranco Ferré's designs, which are more theatrical.
Those clothes were not mine, Gianfranco Ferré. Beautiful fabrics, but I felt that those clothes wore me. I didn't wear them. Saint Laurent, I never really knew. I had met him and had lunch with him or something, but I never knew him because he was more apart. He was kind of, he's more a quiet man, you know. He had a health problem, but he was a genius, absolutely so. Hélène Lusinghausen, who was the directrice of Saint Laurent, she knew all the customers, and she made this one say, that's good for you, that's not good for you. Yves Saint Laurent usually wasn't around there a lot.
I think Saint Laurent was a man who was special, very special human being, very reserved, with an extraordinary eye on people and events. We were all in awe of him. And at the same time, because he was fragile, we all had an extremely soft spot for him. So I think to keep his own autonomy and to be his own person, he had to be left apart from people. He couldn't be bothered and shouldn't have been bothered with details of the daily life. He was an artist. That's the difference.
I do remember Courrèges. I arrived at the Plaza Athénée Hotel, and a woman walked around the door. She had on the best-looking thing I'd ever seen, and I stood in the lobby where I was just checking in, and she had this kind of wonderful thing that looked like, I don't know, like a V-shaped. And I had to find out, and she said, oh, it was Courrèges, and I had never seen Courrèges. And a lovely lady called Drida Mailly, she's still a very close friend of mine in Paris, and she was the directrice there. And she said, Betsy, you must have this and that and the other thing. So that's what we did, and I loved Courrèges at the time.
Courrèges wanted to attack America before France. He did the contrary. He was amazed by the American. So I did for Courrèges 25 boutiques for him in America. And people were buying like mad. They were buying the Courrèges. So all the clients were rushing at Courrèges. And in New York, it was unbelievable, you know. But he pushed fashion in such a way. He said, in the future, everybody will be dressed the same. And I said, but André, how can you tell me that? Now, okay, in China, they all dress the same. In Japan, they all dress the same. And I'm sorry, but if you look in the street, everybody is dressed the same. So he was right. He had a vision of the future, and it's great that he called that couture future, because it was exactly that. The man was a genius.
Adolfo, well, he's just such a sweet, darling man, and still is. And he was always so helpful, and he did my daughter's wedding. And because Adolfo originally, I think, was known for hats.
I did want to do something in fashion, so I started to make hats, ladies' hats. But I didn't really like to do that. I did like to make women's clothes. So little by little, I was able to start to make clothes, which I learned to do them in Paris. I met Mrs. Bloomingdale in the late 60s, and we became friends right away. And Mrs. Bloomingdale, I remember like today, she bought a white organdy skirt and a top, and she took it to Beverly Hills and she wore it. And a couple of weeks after that, and this is true, a lady called me and she said, oh, you know, I saw Mrs. Bloomingdale with that, can I order one? And another lady called me, and another lady called me. And that's Then I became very well known in Beverly Hills, thanks to Mrs. Bloomingdale.
He had the most love. It was on 57th Street, I remember so well, and I never could wait to quite get up there. He was just, because everything he had was like, you know, candy, you know, and I was that. And of course he was, well, he was just a very special man. I was very sorry when he retired. They've all retired on me. That's the thing. Galanos always had the most beautiful clothes, and he, to me, was like French clothes. You can turn his clothes inside out, and they're beautifully on the inside, beautiful on the outside. Amelia Gray, I think, was the first person to have Jimmy, and that's where I met him.
I got to know Mrs. Bloomingdale because of Amelia, and I was very pleased because I knew her reputation. I'd seen her and how elegant she looked and how well she dressed, and you know, Amelia had them all. They would come to her too because she could cater to them in a very, very private and special way, and they loved coming to her, and they could get things where they couldn't get it anywhere else. I mean, she had most wonderful ladies. They all had great figures, and they were very prominent, and that started it. I didn't know anything about making clothes or what have you until I, you know, started to get into it. And when I started at the top. Even at our price range, I made the clothes look like they were expensive. I was adamant about the quality and about the workmanship, and that's what the buyers saw and the press saw. They turned our clothes inside out, and they were amazed.
Oh, you looked at these beautiful clothes and the fabrics and the way they were made. Jimmy was the one who could get the beautiful fabrics. He used to go abroad, buy the fabrics, and he really was, I think, the great, great designer.
When I think of my grandmother and her couture, I think of Red Valentino.
Well, I was going to say the same, but I think we probably all have a different dress in our heads.
Different reds.
But probably a Red Valentino, but a different one.
Which is typical of her. She loves the Valentino reds.
Valentino came into my life then, and he had, of course, wonderful couture, but his ready-to-wear was so beautiful, and it pleased me so much that I didn't really have anybody left in Paris that I was desperate to have the clothes of, because Valentino made the fill. And then also I had the Los Angeles things like Galanos, and Oscar de la Renta has beautiful clothes, Ralph Lauren, and Carolina Herrera are my favorites today.
It's a long time it was my pleasure, desire to work with Mr. Oscar de la Renta. And this man, I love him so much. He's very chic, he's very talented. And for me, I think there is not more after Oscar de la Renta.
What I have always done is extremely very feminine clothes. So perhaps today my business, I know, is far stronger than it has ever been. We like to associate a sense of luxury with money, but it's not money, because you can be fabulously well dressed on a little gray skirt and a little gray sweater. You know, it's the discipline of how you put it together and how you do it. And this is the kind of woman that Bessie is. You know, she has always been that way. When you approach designing clothes, you have to think of make clothes that the woman is going to fall in love with, you know. And, you know, if she really wants it, she's going to get it.
Basically, I tried to make clothes that were really beautiful and elegant. I mean, in my mind, if it satisfied me, I said, if I like it, I'm not ashamed to show it. It's someone else's judgment whether they like it or not. So that we leave that to them.
We were dressing ladies who were accustomed to couture. So obviously they wanted the best and they wanted it to be perfect. So we always thank heavens, and if ever there was a problem and it wasn't quite the way they wanted it or the way we thought it should be on her, we changed it, we canceled it. We never, never sold something that someone was not happy with.
I really didn't like to change a designer's ideas. I made one, I noticed it was a dress that Marc Bohan did, and it was a short dress to begin with, and I decided I wanted it as a long dress. Well, it didn't work as well as a long dress. It was better as a short dress. So I decided, then, let them, the way they've done it is fine, you know.
Once you start manipulating that dress and saying, well, I don't want this sleeve this way, I want it this way, and you start, because couture houses do that. They adopt to designers, to the customers' whims, and you know, and sometimes so you lose the essence of what the creation actually was.
My sort of usual thing in those days was maybe 2 daytime things and 2 nighttime things. And maybe you didn't find what you wanted, or, you know, or maybe you found more than you wanted to find.
It's not like going to a department store where you've got the price tag right there. You would talk to your vendeuse about the price, and it might be whispered in your ear. But the price might be different coming from your vendeuse versus the woman across the room who's interested in the same dress because of the value that you have to the couture house.
Whatever price they gave you, particularly if they wanted you to wear their clothes, the price was always right. It wasn't the kind of thing that you bargained with. In my case, I would never do that, but it could happen. I never chose the ones that were all beaded because the beading was very expensive.
Our kind of embroidery